Hey everyone, thanks for checking in. This is episode 52 of the Crowdfunding Uncut show, or podcast if you're listening to this on iTunes. This week I'm really excited to reintroduce a guest, not just introduce. And I say that because if you've been a long-time listener of the show, you are going to know that Jordan Harbinger is our second time around coming on. And where the first interview was talking about how he created a top-ranked podcast, Jordan is now going to be talking about a topic that's really close to my heart, building solid relationships. And the really cool thing about Jordan is back in 2006, 2007, they founded and started the Art of Charm podcast, where at the time, fun fact, it was a pickup podcast where he would teach men how to pick up women, confidence tips, how to frame the room, and a bunch of other pickup strategies. But the cool thing about this is it's not just the strategies to pick up women, it's how to control a social environment and how to, there were a lot of things in that podcast way back in the day that they actually took and pivoted to what Art of Charm is right now, which is a top-ranked iTunes podcast. They now teach people how to become the best version of themselves by teaching them social skills, confidence, sales, you name it, just how to be a more effective human being, and not just like the fluffy stuff, but it's really actionable content, and I do recommend you check out the podcast. The reason I wanted to bring Jordan back onto the show is I finally had a chance to meet the guy when we attended Tropical Think Tank back in like 4 months ago now, I think. And it's a conference put on by Chris Ducker. Jordan was a speaker. And the really cool thing about TTT is if you look around the room, about 95% of the people there are internet entrepreneurs making money online. But Jordan's topic wasn't about how he made money online through AOC. It's about how we are losing touch with real relationships offline, and how as we get more embedded in social media and having fake relationships online with people we may never meet, how to really not lose sight of that, but also how to intentionally build your network and your net worth by using some of the strategies that he uses, and they're just freaking awesome. So this conversation we're about to have is part 2 of a drunken conversation we had on the beach in Cebu. And I'm just fascinated by like how much he knows. And I really wanted him to be a good teacher to you guys. So Jordan, I'm really excited to have you on the show. And I would love to find out what you've been working on in the last 4 months, because we haven't really talked much.
Take little challenges about body language, vocal tonality, reaching out to other people, getting their goals in line. So we've been working on that business-wise. Of course, I've been stepping up my game with the show as much as possible, interviewing folks like General Michael Hayden, who was the former head of the CIA and the NSA, Hines Ward, the Super Bowl MVP, two-time Super Bowl MVP, and a couple of philosophers and the usual run of authors and folks like that. So just constantly trying to grow the traffic of the show. I mean, it's now's the time to be growing a podcast if you're into that.
Yeah, and why are you going for certain guests that you're going for right now?
Sure. So it's funny because a lot of times people will ask, and I'm just going to look at some recent guests here, because by the time I've recorded them, it's been a week or so. But I'll go through specific examples. So the last few guests that I've had, let's see, latest post. Now we're getting into like some of the mini-sode Mondays, I do those. Fan Mail Fridays, I do those. But I had Angela Duckworth on. She wrote a book about grit. And I think one of the things that was really interesting about that was that grit is a huge predictor of who's successful and who's not. But what is grit? How do you measure it? So Angela explains that to us. That's a very useful topic, a useful metric. There's a lot of practicals there for the AOC family to listen to and use. And then that I had a Green Beret named Jason McCarthy, who's the head of GoRuck, which might be something that you know of, just in the fitness sphere. It's kind of like Spartan race type stuff.
Yeah, I should look into that.
Yeah, you should. It's a cool community. He started this, and he talks about something called charming the snake, which is a concept used when you're in country, when you're special forces, at least Green Berets, to get the local population behind you. So he talks a little bit about charisma and not just charisma, but networking and relationship development for military purposes and how you might apply this to your life. And before that, we had Amy Herman on, who has taught everyone with a badge visual intelligence, how to become more observant. And that was super interesting because we actually followed along with art that she uses in the museum in New York where she teaches this class. She sent us pictures of the art, and we took a little sort of mini class that you can take along with us during the show by looking at the art while listening to the episode and playing along. And then before that, we had General Hayden, who I mentioned earlier.
Yeah. I mean, when I look at, you've done close to over 500 episodes now.
Mm-hmm.
With, I mean, interview-wise, numbers are a bit scattered. But how do you find what is the key thing you're looking for when you invite someone onto the show?
I'm looking for useful content or something that I can turn into useful content. So, for example, I really don't want somebody who's just famous and has nothing else to offer. And I also don't want somebody who is going to be a boring academic. So I'm looking for a combination of personality, content, and, well, I'll put it in order. Content, personality, and reach. And what I mean by reach is I'm that's a distant third. And what I mean by that is it's great if you have somebody that's got a huge audience of their own. It brings a lot of new fans to the show. But if they don't have that, that should be okay. A lot of podcasters I find turn this, I guess, hierarchy on its head, and they look for reach only. And then after that, they look for personality. And then last and definitely least for most shows, they look for content. So you end up with shows that have some singer guy, and they come on and they wax platitudes about nothing, and everybody walks away.
What was that?
Having wasted their time being there, because I don't need to listen to Kobe Bryant be like, "You just got to push through the pain." Well, I know that you're going to say that. I don't need an interview.
Yeah.
I want to find out how you push through the pain. What kind of pain did you experience? Were there techniques you used to push through the pain? And you got to be able to tease that out. Most people won't do that. So for us, it's content, personality, and reach, not the other way around. And so that's why we get the guests that we do. And the irony is that by looking for the content first, we've managed to build a loyal subscriber base that is so engaged that they want to listen to these long form interviews with these other folks. So the audience is big enough and engaged enough that people with huge reach enjoy coming on the show. So we've ended up getting all three by focusing on what's important, not trying to shortcut to the reach in the beginning. And I see that happening a lot, especially with podcasters. There's a whole term called standing on the shoulders of giants, which has been co-opted in the internet business a lot. Mm-hmm. What that basically means is interview well-known people and then hope that they share it, and then those people end up building your business for you. But the jig is up on that. Like, everybody knows that you're doing that, and so people who are short on time, which namely people with big reach, just start saying no, and it's bad for everybody.
Yeah. I find now that I've been podcasting for, a year, which is nothing compared to you, but I find that I looked for the content and the how-tos and the actionable things so people get real value listening to the show, but then sometimes I find myself interviewing people like, I'm a little bored. Or how do I make this interesting? And so I look at shows like Michael O'Neill's, where he's all comedy and sometimes less action. So I'm like, and then I find yours, which is like really getting to the basics of stuff. And it's like, how do you find that good balance of content, but still enough that people just want to keep listening? Right?
Yeah, that's tough. It's tough. And that's the reason that podcasting is hard, because people try to put it into a can and they go, well, if you ask people this pre-scripted set of questions, you'll have a great interview. And it's not true. You'll have the same interview as everybody else, and it'll still be mediocre. Because in order to host a show, you need to have your own lively, engaged personality. You need to have guests that has that, and you need to be able to tease it out of guests that do not. Mm-hmm. You need to be able to dig for the right type of content. You need to be able to dig for and do your research and prep for the right type of guests. And most people won't do that because it's a lot more work. So what they do is they try to take the shortcut, which everybody is taking. So you end up on this crowded highway in a traffic jam with 99% of people who are emailing all of these different personalities and saying, will you be on my podcast? Here are the questions. And those people just eventually stop responding. So I've noticed that a lot of the bigger guests, I'll say, what other shows have you done? And they say things like, I'm doing this one, these other two, and I'm done. And I'm thinking, well, I hope it's not because of us, and they're like, no, they did 5 or so before, a year ago, or they did 3, or they did the last one and they realized this is a huge waste of time. Half of these guys sitting in their basement, they're not doing anything. and they're wasting my time. And it becomes a huge issue because that's the old cliche is right? We're limited in our amount of time. I'm only going to go on shows that have ROI for me generally, or that are run by friends. And those people are getting asked by everybody. So the way that they cut it down is by saying, who's listening, right? And not many shows can say they've got that type of listener base. It's just not worth it. So a lot of the bottom rung shows and internet properties, doesn't have to be a podcast, could be a YouTube, could be a blog. They're just hoping that they either find people first, which they won't because they're not doing the research or the work, or that they get there before that person has burned out. Or last and hopefully least, hopefully this happens less, they lie about their numbers. And I've even created a guide. Whenever I interview somebody after the episode, I send out a guide as to how to decide what other shows to go on, because a lot of people will listen to shows like The Art of Charm and they'll simply email or tweet at that guest. I see it all the time because sometimes they copy me on it, or sometimes the guest is like, do you know this person? And I'll get 5 emails from the guest 2 days after it airs where they're getting pitched, and I don't know. And some of the people will lie about their numbers and things like that. And so I created a PDF for all of my former guests that basically says, here's what you look for, here's what you ask them. If they don't get back to you with these numbers and they're not higher than XYZ, then forget it. So I do it all the time.
Genius.
Yeah, so it's funny because I didn't think about it at the time, but what we have ended up doing at AOC was we created a standard for, if you've been on Art of Charm, you shouldn't go on anything smaller than XYZ show. Here are the numbers. And most people won't be upfront about those numbers. And so I said the first thing is, if they won't tell you what these numbers are, bounce, because they're not good.
So why did you create that guide for a guest experience after the podcast? Why is that?
What was happening is I started to feel bad. There's a couple reasons. I started to feel bad about guests coming on the show and then getting burned by the next 5 people that pitched them. So they would come on the show and they'd be like, this was great. It was really fun. You read my book and we had a great hour-long conversation and tons of people emailed me and were thankful. And then they'll go and do 10 more shows that they booked 2 days later thinking, this is great, I'm on 10 more shows. And they get crickets, or the host isn't prepared, or they flake and they forget about it and then they got to reschedule, or they didn't realize that they were in California and the other person's in New York, so they got their time zones screwed up. Just really unprofessional kind of amateur hour maneuvers that you see. People that all mistakes that I used to make, don't get me wrong, just all mistakes that I used to make back in the day. The problem is thought leaders, busy people, authors, things like that, they don't have time to be your learning curve, and they don't necessarily realize, since podcasting is sort of new and trendy, they don't necessarily realize that not all shows are going to be like the first 3 shows they did, which are run by celebrities or run by people who have been doing it for 10 years. So I made that guide to save them from that. The other thing is I wanted to protect the podcasting community from itself in a lot of ways, but also from people that don't care about it and are just going to leave and go on to the next get-rich-quick internet BS that's going to pop up in the next couple of years. Because right now, podcasting is super trendy. It's growing a ton. Everybody wants to have their own. It's kind of like where blogs were in 2005. Your has one, and you're like, Mom, you have a blog? It's stupid. Nobody's going to read that.
Why?
And
Everyone has a blog.
Right, and you're right. And now they don't have a blog anymore, and Facebook has basically become everybody's blog for the general population. You don't manage it. You don't have to create it. But what was happening was a lot of people will do things like reaching out to a guest and lying about numbers, or telling them to expect too much back from their appearance in order to get that person on as a guest. And of course, when that doesn't happen, the problem is you reach out, I reach out, other people reach out, and they say, look, I've got this sort of fledgling show, I'd love to have you on. And they go, no thanks, I've been burned before by people who do shows. So you end up with these guys at the bottom trying to get rich quick or whatever, trying to pitch every guest they can and burning people out. And so I wanted to create a filter where they can read this, it's an infographic, when they're done they go, oh, okay, I should only do these types of shows. And I posted it in the podcasting community, and I got a lot of backlash because a lot of people who are new or have smaller shows, they're like, you're such a self-important jackass. And I can't really argue with that because they're probably right. But the truth is, though, that thought leaders don't want to – we're not sitting here trying to rationalize. If I'm an author, I don't really care that you have 100 really dedicated fans. Like, that's great. I'm proud of you. I'm happy for you. But if I'm trying to choose between you and an appearance on MSNBC, it's got to be worth it. And it's probably never going to be that choice. But if I'm trying to choose between you and an appearance on a really large podcast, I have to have some system of metrics. I've got to figure out, do I go and do this YouTube show, or do I go and do these other smaller shows? And I can't do that if everybody's pulling the wool over my eyes. And there's such a learning curve for people who are new to podcasting, guests, I mean, who are new to podcasting, that it's really easy to say, I'm number one in iTunes. Well, what does that mean? You're number one in all of iTunes? Or, oh, no, you're number one in your subcategory. Oh, no, you're number one in your subcategory. And you were only number one for a day when you launched, and that was 3 years ago, and your traffic's gone down since then. So we go from number one in iTunes to number one in the business, but not the business, only in the marketing. And even then, it was 3 years ago, and it only happened for an hour. So you got to be able to decode these types of things. So I teach people how to do that in that infographic by saying, look at the iTunes rank. How long has it been there? Before you say yes, see if it's still there tomorrow. How many reviews does it have? Because you can be number one in all of iTunes. I don't care. But if you have reviews or 23 reviews, you've only been around for 2 days, something weird's going on, and you're going to be a flash in the pan. And I've seen a lot of shows do that. A lot of shows do that.
I should get my reviews up.
You should.
Guys, if you like the show, please leave an honest review. Go to iTunes in the show notes. Anyways, moving on. I think what you do with having how to prepare yourself, or how to protect yourself from future podcasts, is a great way to continue the relationship with a guest after the show. And I'm wondering, like, what are some things you use to keep your network fresh?
Sure. So one of the things, well, actually, what do you mean by network, actually? So, why don't we define that first?
I have my Tropical Think Tank notes in front of me. And one thing that you said, I'm quoting you, it really stuck with me. It said that if you hoard your network, it causes it to atrophy. So you have to maintain your network somehow so that you don't forget about people. You nurture certain relationships that matter to you. So I'm curious, how you do that.
Sure. So to clarify your point, what I mean by you have to work your network or it atrophies is that a lot of people, they don't realize that. Well, first of all, working your network is like a muscle. So if I know you in fact, real world example. Wait, can I tell a real world example involving you?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
So remember a while ago, I introduced you to somebody. And the reason I did that was because we had been hanging out at Tropical Think Tank. This person had posted in a private group, I need somebody who knows how to do crowdfunding. I knew everybody was going to list this one guy who's been doing it for a while, who's a friend of mine too, and a really interesting guy, but I wasn't sure if it was I wasn't sure if anybody was going to mention you, and I also wasn't sure if he was too busy or still doing that. So I mentioned you, and as far as I know, you ended up working with this person.
Yeah, I ran the campaign.
And hopefully that worked out. So yeah, so far so good, right? So I could have just not done anything about that, or I could have maybe just emailed you that link or whatever, but I actually made the connection. The reason that I did it was because your network grows when you have to work it out. You've got to create the relationships and strengthen them by connecting you with that other person, connecting me with somebody else who thereby you kind of pay it forward. You have to do that because if I just know that you do certain things and I have you in my Rolodex for that, but I never deliver any value to you or I never ask you for anything, the relationship tends to stagnate because we're not really using it. I'm not necessarily keeping up to date with you. And then if I ever do need something, I'm in this weird position where then I have to ask you for something and you're like, well, we haven't really done any business before or dealt with each other in any way, but I guess, or you're just like, it's too risky. But if I keep managing to create social capital by introducing you to people, it's great. And the reason that it works so well is it's also scalable. So by the relationship that you now have with Manish is stronger. And the reason that I have with both you and Manish is stronger because I sent you guys an email and then you ended up working together. I didn't have to do any work. I didn't have to scale the campaign or create any graphics or anything. I didn't have to do anything other than plug people who are already in my Rolodex into each other. And that's huge because I can do that 100 times a day if I need to. And I don't do it that often, only when it makes sense. But there might be something every day or every week. And that's how your network relationships get stronger. And most people are not doing that. And that's a problem because you see this kind of hoarding mentality where, oh, I know this person and they're the celebrity's agent, but I never ask them for anything and I never call them or do anything. You're not building up any social capital by not using that relationship. You think you are because you think, oh, I know this famous person, but I've never asked him for anything. If you call and say, I know I've never asked you for anything, but this time it's important, that they're not going to go, well, since you never asked me for anything, I'll do this one time. They're just thinking, yeah, you didn't need anything from me before, and now you need something. That's how it sounds.
You feel a little used at that point, right?
You do. And so if you'd been asking them to get involved with something that's of equally valuable for them, or you're giving them something that's only valuable for them and not for you, it becomes so much nicer and so much better because then you have a relationship with this person. It sounds so simple, and yet I see almost nobody doing this. And it's a huge problem.
Yeah. I think that people get hung up because the example you gave, it was it was a mention on Facebook. Manish said, hey, who knows a crowdfunding expert? And then you shot back saying, hey, I know someone because I, at that point, niched my business to crowdfunding and you knew I was in crowdfunding.
Yep.
So that's easy because it's a direct correlation. But what do you do if, people say, okay, you got this network, provide value to people? That's so flaky. How do you figure out how to provide value to certain people, right?
Yeah.
How do you figure that out?
This is another kind of awesome, I should say neglected, yet potentially powerful strategy that people underutilize entirely across the board. So I'm always keeping an ear out for what might be of value to other people. And it's really easy given social media. I mean, I use social media to activate my network all the time. A lot of people use these automation tools like Contactually or things like that, where it reaches out to this person, it reaches out to that person, sends them a form email. You don't need that anymore. Just look at your news feed. It's already curating a lot of the things that you need. And some people aren't on Facebook, whatever. You can have other lists. But there's plenty on your news feed that's going to tell you who to be in touch with. You can always reach out and do things like that. But what I'm looking for are the needs of my network. Who knows somebody who's good at crowdfunding? I knew that he needed that. So that was easy, right? Because he asked. But if somebody says, man, I really need to get capital for my product manufacturing and I don't want to take out a loan, I might spend just 1 second thinking, all right, well, how would I do that if I were him? Oh, I'd probably crowdfund it. Well, maybe I should suggest that. So I might even reach out to him first and say, hey, have you thought about crowdfunding it? Might be a really good idea. And then he comes back with, yeah, sure, this would be awesome. I guess I could crowdfund it. How does it work? Maybe I'll research that. Oh, it looks complicated. I wonder if there's anybody who can help me. Actually, I do know somebody who can help you. So you get to the same result. You just have a few extra steps. And
I like that.
Happening in my brain. This is all happening in my brain, like at a back burner level. Yeah, I'm not looking at Facebook and going, this person says they lost their shoe. I wonder how I can help them find or get new shoes.
Fire department.
No. I just have no sort of system for it that's on paper. It's not something that I'm spending a lot of time doing, but it starts to become a habit. That's the word I'm looking for. It becomes a habit. And once it's a habit. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you keep talking about this concept of social capital. What is social capital to you?
Sure. It's sort of this ethereal currency that, and the term is something that we thought we created at The Art of Charm, and then we started Googling for our SEO, and I'm like, oh my God, people are using this all over, but it's not a formal definition. What I mean by it is, if I help Manish with something, even if it's just an introduction to you, if I help my friend Daniel with something, whether it's an intro or some knowledge about it, my friend Daniel called me about sales stuff the other day, so I spent some time on the phone and helped him with it, and he made a bunch of money using something that I tweaked for him. Nice. That type of thing is social capital. It's basically reciprocity that is in your favor with other people, or the idea that maybe you've got a huge Rolodex full of people that you know that also like you. That's huge. Or a lot of other people who also have large Rolodexes of people and they're well liked and well connected. That type of mixture would be social capital. So it's essentially capital being like cash, currency, money that you can invest. Social capital has the exact same function in so many ways, right? I know lots of people can help me with this, or I know people who can help me motivate others, or help me sell things, or help me build things, and that is social capital. So I encourage people to build it because it's much easier to amass social capital than it is to amass regular capital, and it's almost inevitably one almost inevitably leads to the other. If you have a great network, you have great connections, it's very difficult not to make money. You have to really sabotage yourself a lot.
Yeah. Because at this point, like, our exchange, it went from, like, I got familiar with your work because I took Interview Your Heroes course by Andrew Warner, and then you were in the forum, and then you came on the podcast a year ago, and then you just ended up being a speaker at an event I went to, and then we bonded, and then after that it was like, hey, Jordan, I have this guest I think you'd really like, and then it's just, like, back and forth, you know, like, it's not... Yep. I didn't go in there with the intention, like, okay, what can I do to get on his radar so I can ask you for everything, right? It's got to be about that, right?
It's not about that. It's not about, you can have a plan to help people. You can even have a specific plan to help specific people, and that's fine. Where it starts to get a little disingenuous is when you start to keep score. And so one of our rules of social capital is don't keep score. And what I mean by that is, if let's say I know that somebody is moving to my town and they have dietary restrictions. And this is a real example. My friend Scott Dinsmore, who actually passed away, as you might know, he did this with another friend of his who moved to San Francisco, and he was vegan. And Scott was like this really athletic guy and wrote and loved this guy's blog, the Zen Habits blog. And he wrote down a bunch of vegan restaurants and locations in the city of San Francisco that he might want to try. And he came to a meetup with this blogger, and he handed him the list. And that was a specific way to help a specific person, and that was great. But what he did not do after that is say, cool, can you write about me on your blog or whatever? That didn't happen. And that was enormously beneficial for him because, well, one, he wasn't looking to do anything like that. It wasn't reciprocal in nature. And it became a favor for somebody that was really thoughtful. So there was a lot of value there. They became friends, and they later on helped each other with business stuff, I'm sure. But what we find is creepy would be to the creepy level / disingenuous level would be to do that and then to say, and now that I've got your attention, if you have time, I would love it if you would write about my blog on your blog so I can get some more fans. That's a little disingenuous because you're basically creating a covert contract with that person where they don't know that they're obligated to you until after you've done something for them, and it's not fair. It'd be like me saying, here's this piece of junk that I found on my desk, you know, and okay, that's $20. You got to pay me for that now. You'd be like, get out of here, jerk face. But
never talking to you again. Yeah,
I don't want your used hand lotion. God knows where that's been, right? So it's something like that. You just don't want, you'd never accept that in your real life. So when people do it online or in business with things like that, it's just as bad. It's just that somehow we've whitewashed it into seeming that it's okay. And the reason that we don't keep score, going back to keeping score, what that means is if you did that, you created the list of restaurants and you sent it to me, and then later maybe you didn't ask me for something right away because you do have a little modicum of social intelligence and you know that I'd be upset by that. You create that, you give it to me, you hand it over, and then a month later I might even say something like, maybe you catch me eating at that restaurant, maybe I post about it online, or maybe nothing. Maybe you just reach back around and say, hey, Jordan, it was really cool to get that, to see you at your meetup, whatever. I hope you're enjoying that list of vegan restaurants. Anyway, can you come on my show, or can you promote this thing, or can you be an affiliate of my product? And then it becomes, you go, oh, okay, that's the whole reason you did that. You're not actually, you don't like me or my product. You want to use me for something. Now, the other side of that is also a downside. The scorekeeping side is both downsides, because if I say no, then what happens is if you're keeping score, you say, oh, I get it. You're a taker, or you're mad at me now for not reciprocating when I feel that I don't owe you anything. However, if you're not keeping score and you do ask me for something, I can totally say no and we're fine and it's like it never happened. There's no problem there. And so that's why you can't keep score, because otherwise you're creating covert contracts with other people and you're going to be disappointed. It's going to change the way you look at those people too, and it's going to sour all of those relationships because you're always going to feel like you got the shaft from most of those people and they're not going to want to deal with you.
And the reason is, this is a great segue from Andrew Warner's interview a couple episodes ago, but he talks about how when you reach out to people, you always have to speak in terms of how it's going to benefit them. And if you come off like, how can this thing benefit me? You're never going to progress in your network or relationships. Like, exactly.
It's a huge, huge problem that people do this because you don't realize it, right? A lot of people who are sort of newbies or whatever, or just self-centered like me, they don't necessarily realize that you're doing this. And it can go under the radar until someone says, hey, man, I know you might not be doing this on purpose, but it looks a little bit disingenuous. And you go, oh, crap. I can't believe that. And I see this so often that it's comical. I was in Denver last week, and I was with my buddies and my marketers we were filming some videos and stuff for a launch. Mm-hmm. And we were sitting there, and our marketer goes, think of a story when somebody did it wrong, did the social capital thing wrong, and we'll throw it in the video. And I go, oh, man, let me think of an example. And right then, his iPad rang, and it was somebody that we used to work with as a group at the Art of Charm. And very, very, very briefly, obviously they didn't get the memo on the skill set that we teach, because the conversation said, hey, what's up, man? It's so-and-so. So I'm wondering if you know anybody in... Oh, wait, hold on. Let me back up. Did you get my book? I emailed you my book. And my friend Rob goes, yeah, I got it. Cool. Do you need any help? Well, I haven't read it yet. It's like a 200-page ebook about working out. It's like, what are you talking about? I'm not going to read this. And he goes, no, I'm good. Well, anyway, cool. Well, let me know if you need any help. Anyway, I'm wondering if you know anybody who does X, Y, Z. And we were all laughing so hard because we were sitting here trying to think of somebody who does it wrong, and just
right there.
It just rings, and there's somebody with a classic example calling only. This is the only time he'd ever talked to him other than in person when Rob was at our office. And the second time he talked to him was months later. The first thing he said was, hi, how are you doing? Do you know anyone who can help me with X? So framed it wrong. And then on top of that, realized his mistake, went back to the beginning of the conversation, which you can't do authentically or reliably, reasonably at all.
This makes me cringe.
Tells him, did you get this thing that I sent you? Totally doing the value thing wrong. Basically, like, read my book and then let me know if I can help you with it, which is his business. Like, let me know if you want to become a client. No. And then hangs up because he didn't have something ready to fire back. And it was interesting because we just had worked with this guy really briefly, and we didn't really get along. And I'm like, oh, that's why. I forgot about that. This person is a taker. They don't get it. And they're not even thinking about what's in it for the other person. So you always do have to frame it, what's in it for the other person. And you should always be giving, ABG, right? Instead of charming or closing, always be giving.
Always be charming, of course. I like that.
I just invented that, and that's amazing. I'm gonna keep.
I like it.
ABC, always be charming.
ABCs.
You always have to be giving, and it's so easy to do, but it's really easy to screw up if you don't build it in as a habit. I routinely email people and say, hey, I hope this finds you well. I was wondering if you knew anybody who did this, 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 and this. If not, no worries. You crossed my mind. But it's okay, because those same people also routinely get emails from me that say, hey, I know you like ribs. Have you seen this new place? It's not that far away from you. I was wondering if you'd been there. If not, let's go. I want to take you there sometime. And they're totally cool with that. And I'm not doing it because later I'm going to send them a request. These are actual friendships or actual people that I like, or even just people that have done business with me, but I'm not thinking about what the immediate return is. And one final example of this that is from my real life is as follows. And I think I probably mentioned this in my talk at Tropical Think Tank.
Maybe.
What happens when I moved to LA, I had a toothache. Did I tell this story? I had a toothache, like a crazy toothache.
Keep going.
Yeah, and I kept calling dentists, and they were like, I'm sorry, I'm full. I can't see you. Oh, we don't accept this type of insurance, all this other stuff. And I'm like, God, I just want this handled. And so they're saying, go to the ER, go to the ER. And I told my friend I'm going to the ER. He's an ER doctor, and he goes, you do not want to go to the ER with a toothache. They're just going to pull everything. They're not going to try to fix it. It's not going to work for you. It's going to be bad. And they're going to send you to a frigging dentist anyway. You're going to be back at square one, so don't do it.
Right.
So what ended up happening was I posted on Facebook, and I said, look, can anybody help me? I've got a toothache. It's really, really, really bad. And this guy who didn't know, just followed me, or a friend of a friend or something like that. He'd created, or he had posted, sure, I don't know you, but my aunt's a dentist in LA. Is this something that you really need, I'll call and make it happen. So he calls and makes me an appointment. I go and see his aunt, and she ends up doing a really good job on my tooth. And of course I write him back, hey man, thank you. You saved my bacon. Anything I can do for you, let me know. And he goes, well, actually, I know I see that you run a business, and this is okay, right? Because remember, he offered to help me, and he's asking me for something that seems pretty appropriate. And I'm in a place where I can say no, because if I can't help, I can't help. He said, I'm a graphic designer. I was wondering if you need any web work done. No worries. And I said, no, I'm good. We do it in-house. It wasn't inappropriate at all. And then he said, well, keep an ear out for me, or eye to the ground, whatever you call it, ear to the ground for me. And I said, sure, no problem. A few days later, somebody had emailed me and said, who does your website? I really need new graphics. And I said, look, I've got this guy's portfolio. I don't know if it's going to be a fit. I mean, it could be, but it could also just not be. But here's his portfolio. Let me know if you want the intro. Portfolio worked out, made the intro. Guy got a full-time job as a graphic designer for this internet marketing company. So he was really stoked. And awesome. That wouldn't have happened. The reason, that's simple reciprocity, big deal, right? But the reason that it's important is because when he hooked me up with his aunt, he wasn't thinking, I'm going to get this random guy on the internet, a dentist. He's going to turn out to be an entrepreneur who knows other entrepreneurs who need graphic design work, ... job. That was not something that he could have possibly anticipated. So if he were judging his giving of value based on opportunities that were on the horizon, he would never have reached out and done that because he wouldn't have been able to see it. So you can't just give people value when you see the opportunity, because you will miss 90% of the opportunities that are behind another layer of the onion. Because
you just don't know, right? You don't know where it can go.
So it's a numbers game, and you have to play the numbers game. But most people are too lazy, or they're too entitled to play the numbers game, and so they miss out on most of the opportunity, because most of the opportunity is not obvious and right in front of you.
Yeah. I know we're going a little over time, so I just want to be cognizant of that. Do you have another 10 or 15?
Sure. I didn't realize I was yammering.
I know, we could talk forever, but I didn't want it to get to midnight. You're like, oh shit.
Yeah, no, we're good.
This is good because, another part of the other side of why it's important to go into relationships not thinking of yourself is the other side of that is really the offline portion. And I find it fascinating how you've built a business around how to build real relationships with people, even though a lot of your entity is online.
Yes.
And you've built your business around solid relationships. Because there's no way you'd be able to get major guests on without these relationships, right? And
well, correct. Not only that. The show started because we were talking about body language, nonverbal communication, vocal tonality, eye contact, and things that were at that point dating related and networking related. And we focused on dating because that was what people wanted to hear. But originally we started with the networking stuff. It's just that was less interesting when you were 24 years old.
Okay.
We were so we've always kind of been in the same area, same niche. We just were talking to a different market. And then we the whole pickup artist thing started to go crazy. That started to become a thing. We were around before that. Then it started to become this really sleazy thing. And I was like, I don't want to get mixed up with these guys. So we tried to distance ourselves from that. But you can't. It's just so hard. So we had to rebrand entirely and just stop talking about it for the most part entirely, because the people who were really into that were kind of weird. And the people who weren't into that, who are our normal audience, they were getting alienated by that. Because you get guys who are like, hey, I'm 41 and married with 2 kids. I don't want to hear about all this other stuff, but I like 90% of what you're doing. So we just said, let's get rid of this 10%, this crusty 10% of guys, and get rid of them. And so we rebranded. So we were always interested in the science of relationships.
Yeah.
And we started to work our relationships not only because that's what we were teaching at our live programs in LA for guys that come through, but also because, we wanted to get better guests. But as the show grew, we realized, well, wait a minute. We've got a ton of social capital. We've got a ton of guests. We've got a huge platform, and we've got a successful business. Now that the stuff is sort of trendy, we're able to teach other people how to do business. We've been in business for a decade. We have some lessons, we can share with younger people or newer people to the entrepreneur game, and we do that a lot as well. And so we find ourselves being in a situation where we have to apply the same skills that we teach at our boot camps and online. And I've noticed the people that don't do this, that don't apply these things and don't create strong bonds and connections, don't create good friendships, they're missing something big time. They're not getting the full benefit of what they could. There's a lot of guys that started online businesses, guys and girls, that started online businesses because they're a little shy, maybe they're a little quiet, they don't want to deal with the day-to-day, and this still bite you in the butt when you need to create relationships with people, when you need to create JV branded content, when you need to create media products, things like that. And so what I've found is people that have crazy good networks, they're always making money, and it's really, really easy compared to people who don't have great networks and relationships. They're constantly, in my opinion, I see them swimming uphill constantly because they're trying to do everything themselves. They're getting bitten by people because they don't know how to reach out to, or don't have a network where they can reach out and go, who's the best person for this kind of media buy? So they find somebody online, get ripped off. When you've got a great network, you can learn from other people's mistakes. And that's huge because I can learn from your mistakes by reading about them online, but I can learn about your mistakes much better if you tell me exactly what you would do in this situation, having to do it all over again. And you put that online. You might not want to talk about the time that you did XYZ, got sued, and it was a huge disaster, but you might tell me if we're friends.
Mm-hmm. No, it's true. Just wondering, have you ever had Oren Clough on your show from Pitch Anything?
Yeah, I had him on a long time ago.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Moving on, because he's very in alignment with your stuff. So
yeah.
So I asked a few of my friends if they had questions for you, and the big one that came up, I've heard the story, but it's so good that I want you to talk about it. It was on the topic of learn about situational changes, and in this, you've been kidnapped a couple times.
Yeah, a couple times. And it's funny because whenever I travel, my dumb friends are always like, third time's the charm. And I'm like, don't say that before I go to North Korea or whatever, or Asia, the Philippines, etc., places where people actually do get kidnapped. So the situational awareness thing is something that we end up teaching a lot also at our live boot camps. And it's definitely super interesting and super exciting for us to see how this translates into relationships. But essentially, when you learn enough about body language, nonverbal communication, eye contact, negotiation, influence, persuasion, things like that, things that we teach at AOC, you start to become a little bit more of a chameleon because you learn how to develop really, really good rapport skills. And so the second time that I ended up being abducted was by Serbian police. This is 10 years ago now. And one of the reasons we were able to get out of that situation and escape is because I was putting the gas pedal down big time on rapport building. So this cop was this state security guy, kind of like their FBI, super angry guy, really, really emotional, and I just kept absorbing it and reflecting back calm. He would be angry and yelling, and I'd reflect back calm. Just not irritating calm, right? That can drive other people nuts and work them up, but just very, very chill calm. And I call this out framing. So it's like this guy's yelling and freaking out, and I'm just pretending like he's talking normally to me. So he'd be like, "Do you want to die right now, you son of a bitch?" And I'd be like, "Hey, do you know what time we can get out of here?" And they're like, "I'm friggin' talking to you, you stupid piece of crap." And I'm like, "Yeah, I can hear you. Sorry, can you rephrase that?" And they're just constant. You can work their emotions down. A lot of the things that FBI hostage negotiators, I'm getting worked up thinking about this story. A lot of the things I learned from FBI hostage negotiators and stuff like that, who I recently did a show with one that'll be out soon. We talk about this a lot, working with people's emotions, getting people into a logical state of mind where they can be persuaded logically instead of emotionally, or at least more logically, and then getting them emotional again when we need to use emotions and persuasion in that sort of field. So there's sort of two baskets, logical and emotional, and you can persuade in both. Emotional is a lot easier. So I'm getting this guy kind of calmed down, and then I'm getting him worked up again, but not at me, and worked up at something else, and then we're on the same team, right? I'm getting him worked up about something that I want him to be worked up about, not me. And so I'm getting him worked up about foreigners, even though I am one, and that's what he was mad about before. So I kind of redirect that. And then before I know it, we're drinking, right? We're ended up drinking with these guys. Don't get me wrong, we were still their prisoners, but they liked us, and we were hanging out, and they started to trust us. And when I told him I was sick and needed water, and he went to go get some, that's when we split. So you have to know how to do these things. It's not just like, a lot of people go, oh, if you ever end up in that situation, you got to make small talk. That's not going to work. Talking about the weather, asking them personal questions, that stuff's not going to work. You've got to ease into it. You've got to have frame control and make sure that you're in charge of the interaction. You've got to make sure that you're asking them questions, that when they're asking you questions, they're not getting answers that they don't want or that they don't like. There's so many things, so many little pieces that go into this. And you see these same pieces coming into play when you're hanging out with your friends and your family. It's just that you're not consciously manipulating everybody else around you. You turn that on as a self-defense skill when you need to, like when you're chained in a basement in Serbia.
Yeah. Do you have any good resources for if somebody wants to, like at a networking event, somebody wants to learn to control the frame so that the conversation isn't constantly about them, it's about the other person and them getting some information?
Yes.
What do you have?
There's something called deflect, defer, disclose. I guess we could call it the 3 Ds. It just sounds kind of stupid, but we call it deflect, defer, disclose. And that looks a little something like, hey, Jordan, what do you do? And I might even, frame control would be, if we're not face-to-face and it's appropriate to do so, I might pretend like I didn't hear them and go, so what do you do, Khierstyn? Right? And then just like, well, I'm not going to sit here and argue and go, I asked you first. You're just going to answer me because you'll just assume I didn't hear you or that I had a brain fart, right?
Yeah.
So that's sort of a deflect. And then defer, you might say, so what do you do? And I might say, this might get a little drawn out. I'm kind of a windbag. Tell me what you do first. And you might go, all right, fine. Well, anyway, and then you start talking about what you do. And then after you do that, or if you're very insistent, then I'll disclose what I do. And the reason I do that first is because if I want to talk about what I do because it's going to help me in business and maybe I'm in a circle full of people, I want them to know what I do, I want to talk last because then I'm not stepping on other people's toes if I take a little bit more time. Or what happens if you say, oh, I'm a talk show host and I also teach advanced social skills training and persuasion. People are like, wait, what? Because the guy before me was a consultant and the guy before them was an insurance salesman, right? So it trails the conversation. So sometimes I don't want that because I'm just not in the mood. But other times I do want that, but I don't want it to be rude. And then suddenly the guy next to me is like, well, I guess nobody cares what I do. And then it makes me look bad for that reason. So I'll deflect, defer, disclose, and I'll be able to do that and control when I talk about what I do and with whom and exactly how it gets delivered and when in the conversation that it gets delivered. And those things are important because otherwise someone else is in control of the conversation. And you probably have been there when someone goes, what do you do? And you go, I don't want to talk about it right now. I'm tired,
I get to the point sometimes where I don't even tell them I do crowdfunding. I just say, yeah, I'm a startup advisor. And they're like, oh, what do you do? I'm like, well, I help people launch products online.
Yeah, and they're like, whatever, I don't care. I was just making
I'm trying to make myself sound super boring because I just don't want to get into it if I don't feel that they're relevant to what I'm doing.
Yeah, and the problem there is, of course, and this is something that we probably should stop doing because, of course, what we do want is we want to be able to get referrals from everybody. And so it's really tough. And the problem, though, and the reason, and we can wrap with this because it dovetails really nicely right away, you don't want to do it because they're not necessarily relevant to you. But what did we say before? Well, you can't really see a lot of the opportunities because they're under the next layer of the onion. So the reason usually that we don't want to disclose is because we don't feel like talking about it, or because if you say, well, I'm a crowdfunding, they go, what's crowdfunding? And then you're like, you got to go into that and you got to do this. And So something called the tornado technique, and I'll give you a brief overview of what that is.
Tell me.
What that essentially is you tell other, and we have drills and exercises for this that we run in our social capital product. But what this is you tell people what you do, and you tell them in a way that they can then translate to someone else. So layman's terms, yes, but also in a way that's sticky. And so what that means essentially is instead of saying, well, I have a iTunes Top 50 podcast where I interview high performers and deconstruct what they do and teach that to my listening audience. Somebody might be like, what? You might just say, I'm a talk show host and I interview highly successful people or interesting people or whatever. And then that way the taxi driver, for example, or the other person at the dinner party can tell somebody else what I do in a way that makes sense. So if your job description goes through the tornado technique, it can go through a game of telephone. Remember that game? Telephone?
Mm-hmm. I do.
Go through the game of telephone, and somebody on the other end can say, hey, you're that guy Jordan. You have a talk show where you interview interesting people or something like that. Is that right? And you go, yeah, pretty much. But if I say, well, I teach high performers this or that and the other thing, it's not getting past the first rung on that ladder. It's not going to make through the game of telephone. And the problem with that, the reason that that's important is because if you do crowdfunding or you tell startups how to get capital for products or launch products online, you want referrals. You're not going to get referrals if the person has to go into the history of Kickstarter campaigns and GoFundMe and crowdfunding.
This is just over their head, right?
It's going to go over their head. They're not even going to be listening, let alone memorizing it, and let alone telling somebody else. So it's not sticky and it doesn't help. So yeah. Most people can't do that because we're so close to our jobs that we don't know how to tornado our occupation so that other people can tell other people what we do. And that's a problem because I want everybody talking about the art of charm. So the simplest thing for me to say is talk show host. I interview interesting people or successful people and have them teach things to my audience. Pretty much anybody can remember that, and I do tailor it to the audience as well. If I'm in with a whole bunch of entrepreneurs, I interview entrepreneurs and have them teach things to my audience, and then everybody knows what I do, and they're all pitching me, and that's where I want it. I want to be in that position where all these successful people are asking me for my card. Like I want that. So you tailor that type of thing. If it's a really techie crowd, you could easily say, I do crowdfunding for startups. Everybody knows what that is. If you're at your Thanksgiving dinner with your family, don't even mention internet because half your family doesn't even have it, right?
Yeah. I make money online. When could you make money online?
Oh, can you make money online? I didn't know you could make money online.
So if I wanted to find out more about the tornado technique, you mentioned it was part of your social capital product. Where can I find that?
theartofcharm.com/social capital. Okay. So it's essentially an entire course about networking and relationship development. Okay. And what we do is we teach how to find the right people for your network, how to screen the right people in, how to maintain your network, how to reach upward in your network, why you should be reaching downward and across, how to reach up to people at work, how to reach up to people in your social life. Like it's a whole course on networking and relationship development, not necessarily for business, but it's for both business, I should say, and personal life. So it overlaps both of those things because you can't separate the two. It doesn't make sense. There's tons of people that network at work and have no friends outside of work, but there's not very many people who are successful isolating just their work network or their personal network. Usually there's massive overlap. And the people who develop the best relationships, the strongest ones, the most influential ones, are the ones that tend to be the most successful. Mm-hmm.
And I vote for overlap.
Yes.
That's my jam. Overlap. I won't take a client on if I can't hang out with them.
Really? That's a good idea. Yeah. Because otherwise they're going to be a huge pain. And by hanging out with your clients, they're more likely to be reasonable because they value the friendship in addition to the business arrangement. That's really
not only reasonable, but I find that I could be completely honest and open and be comfortable saying what I need to say sometimes. And it's okay because there's a relationship on that as opposed to like, I don't know this person. I feel uncomfortable with them. I can't really be open with them. That's just how I am.
This product sucks, but I don't want to say anything because they're probably going to get mad. Versus, oh, Jim's cool. He'll understand that we need to redo this. And he'll take he knows I'm not just ripping him off to bill 3 extra hours. Like, he knows that this is not where it needs to be.
Exactly.
Yeah. So. It's a good policy, as much as you can enforce it. It's hard online.
It's hard, yeah, because you don't know. Sometimes you have 2 conversations with someone and you're like, yes, I'm doing this or whatever. But, yeah. So, dude, this has been awesome, as always.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
No worries. Do you have any famous last words?
Leave everything better than you found it.
Love it.
You knew that was coming.
Coin that. I did. That's like your thing.
That is my thing.
That's your thing. So, great. Well, thanks so much.
You got it.
Good.
Yep, cool. You got it. Let me know when it's out.